People are starting to come in now. It is just turned noon here. You're on the West Coast, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're at 9 a.m.?
9 a.m. Haven't had breakfast yet.
Thank you for joining us first thing in the morning.
Yeah, no problem.
So I am Lexi Grant. I run They Got Acquired for folks who are just joining us. And this is Sharon Gillenwater. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to chat with you. I'd love to see some chatter in the chat if folks want to tell us where they're calling from or just say hi or even what you're interested in hearing about today. Great. I see people. Thank you for coming. Hello, hello, hello. We've got about 150 people registered today, so I'm going to give it a couple minutes. I think we'll have some more people join from all over. Great. Thanks for that, Matt. Matt says he's interested in hearing about personal finance planning before and after the sale. So Sharon and I met about a year ago when we wrote about her sale, and we've become friends ever since. So I'm really grateful for that connection.
Yeah, me too.
All right, I'll give everyone a minute or two more before we start here. Hello, Tampa. I used to live in the Tampa area and I missed that. Good, we got people from all over. And I see Andrew's in there. Thank you, Andrew. Andrew's on my team and he's here to help us if we need it, which is always nice. DC, yes, that's where I am too. I'm outside of DC. All right. All right, let's get started and we can, people can join us as they arrive. So I'm Lexi. I'm founder of They Got Acquired. We have with us today Sharon Gillenwater, who is an exited SaaS founder and author of the book, which I have right here. Don't blur it for me. Scaling with Soul, which I loved. This is a really personal, a personal story, which I really appreciated about a business book. If you're looking for a good read for your next airplane flight, like when I read it. So Sharon, thanks for coming here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we're all really excited to hear about your journey, both building and selling your business and what's happened since then. And I mean, we've talked a lot, so we know a lot about each other. So I think that kind of adds a little bit of freshness to being able to have a conversation. But I'd love to start where we are right now, because you sold 3 years ago. You sold a SaaS company for 25 million. And you're in a really interesting, something really interesting is happening right now to the company that you sold. And I think this is really common and we don't hear about it a lot. So can you start by telling us about that?
Yeah, so about 3 to 4 weeks ago, I woke up to a bunch of texts from people who used to work for me. And they said that with no warning, the company was being shut down and more than half the team had been laid off. The product is going to be sunset. And I'd like to emphasize that I didn't sell my company to the company that's doing this. I sold my company to a strategic acquirer called Euromoney, but about 9 months after I did that, they packaged it up with a bunch of other brands and they sold it to private equity. This seems to be some kind of case of financial engineering on their part, because I did request a meeting with the private equity leadership and I had a meeting and I offered to buy the company back. I made them a couple of different offers and they didn't try to negotiate. They just said that selling Boardroom Insiders was not sufficiently attractive for them. That's how they put it in those words. And I was really disappointed because buying it back would enable a lot of jobs to be saved and it would ensure continuity for the customers. Mm-hmm. So, I made a couple of goes at it. They're not interested. So then I put out a TikTok video wondering if I should restart the company. And if I did, how quickly people think I could get those enterprise customers back, because enterprise deals, not just enterprise deals, but deals with enterprise customers, there's a difference there, are very hard to bring to fruition because you have to do, these large organizations require things like huge security audits and data privacy documentation and The POs take months to get. So that as rebuilding an enterprise product as a new company, even though we're the same people, the same team, it would take a long time to get to revenue. So some customers saw that video and went back to them and said, what is going on? We just signed a 2-year deal for this product and things like that. So I'm a bit of a bomb thrower when I need to be. I admit it. I threw a bomb and I don't know what's going to happen, but I've been talking to a lot of people in the industry. I've been talking to customers and various stakeholders to see if this is a good idea or not, because with AI in the picture, it might not be. The product might have a shelf life of just a few more years.
How did it make you feel when you saw that? Because I think we all kind of have that worry that like we sell the company and then a new buyer or a buyer of the buyer does something that we don't expect with it.
Yeah. Well, that's always a possibility. And it's something that weighed into the decision-making when I needed to sell it. And I see Shiva asked, do you feel guilty for employees? Of course I do. And for the most part, I had really good response on TikTok, and I had some fantastic ideas that people had for how to do this and ways to shortcut to enterprise sales. But here's the thing that I think people don't understand when you build and sell a company. There seems to be this misconception that entrepreneurs are already rich when they build a company. I went into about $500,000 in debt. I didn't save for retirement for a decade. I had kids going to college. My house was falling down. I live in a 100-year-old house and I needed home repairs. And I had not been paying myself. I didn't pay myself for the first 4 years I ran the company. I had a second job. And I didn't even hire employees for the first 8 years. So people who come at me saying, you did this, you screwed your employees. It's like, girl, I didn't hire anyone for 8 years. Like people were only there for like 4 years. And by the way, I did pay out to my employees $800,000 from the sale. So it's a more complex situation than people assume. So really be careful of assuming how entrepreneurs are or what their state is when they start companies. It's you sacrifice a lot financially, and it can be well worth it. It was in my case, but I had to sell. I had to sell to retire and to secure my retirement. So it wasn't just like, oh, it would be nice to sell and make millions of dollars. It's like I had to do it. And my partner also was in the same boat. He had 3 kids starting their college journeys, and we needed to, get the value from all the work we had been doing for 14 years.
Well, that's what I love about how you share what you went through, because I think these are the things we all need to hear. And for many of us, I think it just normalizes the experience. But also it brings up, things that we didn't know about or didn't expect, because most people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So before we go any farther, we've got a lot of people coming in now. So real quick housekeeping, guys. On the right side of your screen, you see the chat. Please use that liberally. I feel like some of the best insights sometimes come out of a chat when someone adds a thought or notices something that was interesting. There's also a questions tab that you can click into and ask Sharon a question, and we will depending on how many there are, I may stop, halfway through and start going through those questions. There's also a polls section, and I'm going to push a couple of those polls live right now. One says, what kind of company do you run? And the next one is, what's your company size? And if you can go ahead and vote on those, then we can kind of get a sense of like who's here today and what's most helpful to you all. And you can see, once you take the poll, you can see who's here too, which I always think is interesting. And then on the right side, there's one more box called offers, and I'm going to push a few things live there as well. The one I'll do first is just Sharon's newsletter, because she shares lots more advice like this in her newsletter. And if you're not on it, it's a great opportunity. Cool. I already see some questions coming in, so this will be great. All right, make sure you take those polls, and you can see, good, we have some SaaS people here, some agency folks. And then in terms of size, about almost half is less than $250,000 a year. We have a few in the millions. Awesome. Okay, I'll keep those live. And if you haven't taken it yet, you can do that while we're chatting. Okay, so Sharon, let's back up a little bit. This was the first time you sold a business. So how did you know what you were doing?
I didn't, but the story was, we were starting to get a lot of outreach from private equity, and I didn't want to sell to private equity, but it got me thinking, well, what's the business worth? And is now the time? Because my partner and I knew that the tech crash was coming. We sold into big tech.
Sharon, do you want to back up? Someone's asking what your business was. So let's first, I should have asked you some basic questions about that. I want to talk a little bit about the business. We know it's a SaaS business.
It's a SaaS business called Boardroom Insiders, and it takes the fear out of C-suite selling. C-suite selling is when big companies who have big deals, big ticket deals, have to justify their value to the C-suite of the buying company. Not the features, the benefits of the product, but what is your product going to do for the business? Is it going to save them money? Is it going to help them close bigger deals faster? Is it going to drive revenue? And so in order to have those conversations, you have to have deep insight into the C-suite players who you're going to be meeting with. And that's what our product helped them with. And it also helped them with a discipline that's used a lot in tech marketing called account-based marketing. So if you know about account-based marketing, you know you need to have really deep intelligence into those accounts and the leadership of those accounts. So that's what the SaaS platform was dedicated to. And yes, so because our customer base was highly concentrated in big tech, and we know that big tech flies high and then it crashes. It always does. And so we felt the crash was coming, my partner and I. And when we saw that that acquirers and private equity were sniffing around, we went for it. And you don't negotiate with just one buyer at a time. You hire a banker or a broker. I highly recommend that, because they know what they're doing if they're a good one. And my partner explained it to me like this. He said, it's like selling your house. You wouldn't put out a sign and negotiate with each buyer individually or assume that the buyers are going to find you. You have to have an expert who creates demand, who fixes up your house, stages it, makes it look pretty, tells you what's wrong with it and needs to be fixed before you take it to market. And the mergers and acquisitions bankers, that's what they do. So my partner, who was more finance focused, he said, you have to do it because you have the most to win or lose as the majority shareholder. So I did it, and I talked to a ton of people. That's how I learn. I learn through stories. I don't learn well and absorb bullet points of do this, then do this. I need to remember a story. Oh, so-and-so said they did it that way. So I just talked to a lot of founders who had sold, and I talked to a lot of bankers, and I led the process, and the process went very well. We only got one offer, but I did go back to the buyer and ask them for 50% more than they offered, and we ended up getting 33% more. And it was all cash, which I didn't even realize at the time how great that is. It's worth taking a lower valuation to get all that cash, because if they give you a much higher valuation, but a lot of it is this kind of, maybe you might get this stock or, performance-based compensation, it may not happen. You need to be happy with whatever the cash is that you get out of that deal, because you may not see the rest of it.
Wow. So let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit how you started the business and then how you also brought on a partner to work with you?
Yeah. And before I say that, the QSBS, someone said, I like this question, if I was able to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
No. And a lot of people on Twitter said, well, you're an idiot, or your accountant is an idiot. I was not wealthy when I started this business, and I needed the tax benefits that come with an S corp. I needed them desperately to stay in the business, and so did my partner. And we got those tax benefits for 12 years. So that's why we didn't do QSBS.
So for anyone who doesn't know what QSBS is, it's basically a way to pay less tax when you sell, but it's a bit complicated, and it requires that it has several requirements. One of which is that you become a C corp, right? Like something like 5 years before you sell the business. Now, I think some of this changed recently, and some legislation that just passed. So you always want to like talk to your accountant, your lawyers about all these things. But a lot of people who sell in the range of what Sharon did, they if they know about this ahead of time, they will take the steps years before to make sure they have the right structure, and then you can take advantage of this tax break when you actually sell. But that's interesting that you hadn't done that, and that's an interesting reason why.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I saw people on Twitter coming after me for it, I mean, gotta love Twitter. That's why I'm not on there anymore. But I mean, they were really just lambasting me over this, and I panicked and I thought, what did I do? Did I make a big mistake? And I called my accountant for Boardroom Insiders. He's like, no, Sharon, don't you remember? We switched you to S corp in the very beginning because you and Lee you needed those tax benefits. And he's like, you got those benefits over 12 years. So honestly, it's probably a wash. And so I was like, oh, phew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's not always obvious that you should, become a C corp earlier either. There's a lot of different things that go into it. So I think it's not as easy in retro. People always say, oh, you should have done this or that. But when you're going through it, like, it's not always as obvious.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you walk us through just kind of briefly, so we know the background, like how you started the company and how you found your partner?
Yeah. So I didn't set out to start a company. I was doing consulting in big tech marketing. And I was doing mainly strategy consulting around events. So, what big trade shows should Cisco go to, and what should they do at those trade shows to drive their objectives? They put a lot of money into that kind of planning, and that's what I was doing. And over the years, what gradually I started to notice is all of big tech. I mean, I was working for VMware, Cisco, NetApp, Oracle. They would all say, we really need to get to these C-suite decision makers. How can we create something that's attractive to them? Should we do a little CIO summit within the big event? And I just started noticing, wow, they really need to get into the C-suite, and they're having trouble doing it. And so I did a whole research project and talked to people about, what captures the attention of the C-suite. And it all came down to a couple of things. And one of the things was just relevance. They don't want to hear about your product. They don't care. They're going to give you 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes, you better come in and tell them what you are going to do to drive their specific business initiatives. And you better know what those initiatives are, or they're going to kick you out before the 5 minutes is up. And so I realized that even though companies like Cisco have deep information on all their accounts, what they really have in their account plans is what they want to sell to that account. But they have very little in their account plans about the account and the people who are making decisions there and their priorities. And so I created dossiers as an experiment. And Sun had hired me to do some of these too, in-depth C-suite dossiers, like a CEO of Procter & Gamble. Who are they personally, and what are their business initiatives? And I got really great feedback that those dossiers were critical and really not only helping them have better meetings with these folks, but get the meeting in the first place. We'd hear things like, I've been trying to get a meeting with the CIO for 2 years, and I just took one hook that I found in the profile, and they got back to me in 5 minutes. So put all those in a database, built a database of Fortune 500 C-level profiles, and then eventually built a true SaaS platform on top of all that data that created dashboards for groups of accounts and groups of people, kind of like a persona, but with real people, the real people that they care about. And that's what really supercharged account-based marketing efforts and made us very popular with account-based marketing teams in big tech.
Mm-hmm. And at what point did you bring a partner in?
2 years in. I was the bridge from consulting to product is much longer than you think. Probably shorter these days, but in the early days of SaaS, it was much longer than you think, because marketing practitioners were not used to using all these subscription-based tools yet. So about 2 years in, I was just using it as a tool for my own consulting. I was still doing all the deliverables and presenting all my work in slides, and I felt stuck. And so I made a 30-day call blitz to anyone who would talk to me. I focused on people who had done what I was setting out to do, which is to create and sell a SaaS platform, B2B. And I met a man named Bobby Martin, who sold his B2B SaaS to Dun & Bradstreet in 2007. He introduced me to one of his former sales guys, Lee Demby, and he said, not only can Lee sell, he would make an awesome partner for you. And so I wasn't even looking for a business partner, but after meeting Lee and talking to him for months, we decided that this would be a good thing for him to come on as a partner. So he came on as a partner in 2011, I think it was. And the rest is history.
Yeah, that's cool. So can you walk us through when you sold? Because I think this is one of the things that you have become kind of legendary for on TikTok and people don't talk about enough. When you sold, where did all that money go? Like, everyone thinks, oh, she sold for $25 million. That all went into her bank account. You had a partner, you had team members. Can you walk us through that?
Yes. So yeah, people think, they see that headline and they think that all went into your pocket, and that's not true. And particularly with VC backed, whoa, is that not true? And a lot of people don't share their numbers. And my Gen Z son inspired me to share my numbers. He's like, Mom, you gotta do it. And so I made this video, and it was a couple days before it got posted, and I couldn't sleep. I was freaking out about it, but I knew it was the right thing to do. So so you sell for 25 million in cash. I walked away with 13 million, and after tax, and I live in California, 9 million, which I think is pretty good. That's 30% tax. So the bankers got like a little over $1 million. I think it was like 4%. The lawyers got 200,000. They did 2 months of work. So 200,000, and then the accountants got 52K, and they were like the MVPs. These were our company accountants that we had used for a number of years. So they really were motivated to have our backs, and they found little things that would save the shareholders money here and there. The shareholders, which includes my business partner and our 3 angels, we did raise 200,000 in angel money. They got around 9 million total. And for the investors, that represented an 11 times ROI. So I was really proud of that, because it's like a venture level, LP level kind of return. Not an embarrassing return, a very good return. And so the employees, we paid out 800K. What we had was something called a phantom equity plan that you don't hear about it much, but my partner told me about it, because that's what he had when he was working for Bobby Martin, and Bobby sold his company. And basically what it is, it's a very simple, easy 2-page agreement that says if the company sells, that there will be a 3.5%, that was the percentage we chose, 3.5% pool from the net proceeds. So that's after the banker fees and all that stuff, that gets allocated amongst the employees. And it gets allocated based on what are called benefit units. And so you just create an arbitrary number of units. I think we had 6,000. And then as founders, you allocate those units to different employees based on their contribution to the business and their seniority. So, remember, we didn't hire anybody until 2016. And then half of our company had been hired since 2019. And we had a 2-year vesting. So we only had 14 vested or partially vested employees out of 28.
Mhm.
Because most of them had been there less than a year. A bunch of them had been there less than a year. So that 800,000 was divided amongst 14 vested or partially vested employees.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. What's been like the response since you have shared that? Since I think that's something that like a lot of people are scared to put out there.
Yeah, it was scary. The response was amazing. I mean, it went super viral, but and I expected that. When you put something like that out there, you expect it. And I like the way I started the video, because this is really what I felt in my gut. It's like, when someone sells their company, there's one thing that everyone wants to know, but is too afraid to ask. How much money did you walk away with, and where did the rest of the money go? And I knew this because my partner and I wasted hours over the course of our 12 years together. There would be an announcement that so-and-so sold, and we get on the phone like, how much did you think they get? Well, I heard he raised this much, and I think they had this much of this. Like, we try to back into the math. And it's like, let's just put it out there. Now, Lee, my partner, I'm sure he is horrified by what I did. I really try not to mention him or break down his take or anything, because he's a very private person. He doesn't like social media. We're like opposites, which is why we did well together. But yeah, he's never mentioned it, but I'm sure he was just like, oh my God, Sharon, what have you done? And in fact, when we sold, the buyer put out a press release, and I was so pissed that our names weren't in it. I'm like, I can't believe we did all this work and we're getting no glory. And he said, Sharon, he's like, you don't want your name in there. I guarantee you, anyone who finds this out is going to think that you put every one of those $25 million in your pocket.
Mm.
And that's actually another freeing, liberating reason to put it out there, because that's what people think. And then they aspire to do this, and they're going to be disappointed because, first of all, what I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you make financial sacrifices as a founder, especially if you're not a wealthy founder to begin with. And you're like, it's like you're running to the finish line and you're bleeding and your clothes are coming off and you may not make it and you're not in good shape financially, usually. If you are, good for you. But I wasn't, and a lot of founders aren't. And so you want people to know that, so that they know what they're getting into. And it's helpful for people who might be coming after you for money to realize, like, oh, yeah, she doesn't have FU money. She doesn't really have as much money as I thought, and then they're going to be like, temper their requests, whether it's people coming after you for a donation or for an investment. It's just really important to share the truth about it, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk to us about the sale itself? So just walk us through, like, how did you find a banker? Where did the buyers come from? Like, what was due diligence like? I'm curious about all those pieces.
Yeah, well, I always say this: anything you need for your business, whether it's an accountant, a lawyer, a banker, go to your network. And the problem is I didn't have a network of entrepreneurs. I didn't know many entrepreneurs. The people I know in San Francisco are like in healthcare, or you meet people through your kids. My kids were in school, so they were in healthcare. They were in nonprofits. There weren't a lot of people in business except for the men. There were not a lot of entrepreneurs. My partner had the network of entrepreneurs, so he would go to his network, and we actually backed into the banker by hiring the lawyer first, because someone in his network said there's this law firm, Morris, Manning, and I always forget the third one, Morris, Manning, and Martin in Atlanta. And my company was actually in South Carolina, where my partner was. And they said they'll do this document review for you if you're thinking of selling. They do it for free with the assumption that if you sell, you're going to excuse them from the transaction. So we did our document review to make sure we had everything buttoned up enough to even start exploring the sale with Morris, Manning, and Martin. And then we asked them for banker recommendations, because they know if they've worked with competent bankers or who the good bankers are. So we got a few recommendations from them. We got a few recommendations from my partner's network. And I really did all the interviewing of the bankers. He participated sometimes, but I did the in-depth interviews. I created a spreadsheet that broke down all of their different fee structures and put some plugs in there for valuation to see, how much they were really going to cost us in the deal. And then the most important thing I did is I talked to the entrepreneurs who use those bankers to sell within the last 2 years. I asked them for people who had sold within the last 2 years, who had a similar company size, and who were in SaaS. And so those were the most informative conversations I had, and I learned a ton. When you're thinking of hiring a banker, there are some people who will tell you, well, they take too much money and you should just sell it yourself. No, when I talked to those founders, there were several that I talked to who had tried to do that, and it was a complete disaster. And what happens if you take your company to market, then everyone knows you're trying to sell it. And if it doesn't sell, then people will kind of discount your value and say, oh, well, their valuation is lower now because they couldn't sell. So you have to go dark for like 2 years. So I didn't want to do that because we were afraid of the tech market crashing. So it did validate my intent to hire a banker. And the banker I hired was out of New York City, called Leonis Partners. And they were a relatively small firm. And I just really thought that they would do the best job. And timing was important too. Timing was critical because um, of the fear that the tech market would crash. We didn't want to wait. And some bankers said, well, we can't do this until next year. And so Leonis could take us on right away. And they were very aggressive in their timeline. They said, we think we can close this by the end of the year. And that was 2021. We didn't close till January 2022, but it was close.
Wow. And so what was due diligence like?
Due diligence was 2 months. There is some kind of, they set up a data room. The banker sets up a data room in the beginning. So that started Labor Day of 2021. And I remember this because I was away for Labor Day and I spent the whole weekend uploading documents into the data room. But then the due diligence started Thanksgiving. I remember that because I was doing that Thanksgiving for the buyer. And it's kind of frustrating because you have to do it twice. You have to do it once for the banker, but then nobody looks at that stuff over there. And then you have to upload it in the buyer's area. So if someone wants to disrupt something, that's what needs to be disrupted is streamline that for founders and deal teams. But it was just a lot of administrative, finding documents, uploading documents, answering a gazillion questions that get input into a spreadsheet with a gazillion tabs, seemingly inane questions, but you have to answer them and not complain about it. My favorite one was, who is Sharon Gillenwater and what is her role? Like they ask things that are so obvious and you've given them the answers or they've met with you, but you have to do it. It wasn't as bad as people say because we were very organized with our documents. That's something that Lee made me do early on. I am not an organized person. I have everything all over my desk and in boxes, and he is not. He is like, we got to have this buttoned up. So he forced me to do it, I was so grateful for because it made due diligence much easier. And he also forced us to put in place documentation that I didn't even have, like service level agreements that had been reviewed by lawyers and an operating agreement and stuff about state taxes. He wouldn't stop hammering on state taxes because we were a SaaS company. And at that time, there was starting to be murmurings about state taxes on internet products. So, and then with the areas of the business that I didn't know that well because I had delegated them to others, like a fractional CFO, the fractional CFO became part of our deal team. He participated in any calls where we were going through the financial model or the sales projections or kind of the historical revenue where they determine the quality of your revenue. Like, is it true ARR or is it something else? And then they discount it. So the fractional CFO, and then my founder and I were both non-technical. We didn't have a single technologist on our staff. So our development firm, which was a very strong partner for us, they did all the InfoSec calls and all the tech stack calls with us. And so it was important that I set those expectations early on with them. Like, look, we need you to be part of our deal team, charge us whatever your hourly is, but we need you on those calls. And that was important.
Cool. I'm muting and unmuting myself here because my mic's being weird. So I want to make sure everyone can hear you. But I'm going to go through a couple of the questions, and then I have some more of my own too if we have time. But I want to answer the ones that people have voted. And the first one is, what was your company revenue at sale? So I'm curious about that. And maybe can you talk about like the sale multiple as well and like what it was like during that time? Because this is in 2021 when it sold.
Yeah. So the revenue was a little bit above 5 million ARR. So we got about 5 times ARR, which was low for SaaS at the time. But there were a couple of things going on there. First, we were not a classic SaaS. We had a pretty heavy white glove service component for our customers. And one of those things was our customers had the ability to request net new records, because our records were deep, like, 7-page records. So we went very deep, but we had a narrow data set, a small data set, unlike most SaaS, which have a huge data set, but their records are very shallow. So our customers were able to request new records, and it was part of the model. It was part of their pricing. But investors, acquirers didn't love that. Because it takes, at the time, before AI, it took people to produce those records. So that really, we knew that we wouldn't get the 8 to 12 multiple that SaaS was going for at that time because of that. The other thing was we got one offer, and we were acquired by a public British company. They were public at the time. And the first thing I did is I read all their earnings call transcripts, and I found out how much they paid for 4 other data products that they bought from 2019 to when we were sold. And they paid between 1 and 2 times revenue for all those. And the reason is they were distressed assets, like pretty badly distressed assets. We were not a distressed asset. We were profitable. We were growing. We had everything buttoned up. So we got a much higher multiple than they were used to paying. But this was not California money. This was not Silicon Valley money that people are throwing around. This was like British money. And this company was had been around since 1969. And they're not going to pay a Silicon Valley multiple. But we were happy with what we got, because we were always very worried that our scalability issue would make us a non-viable acquisition candidate. So we were just happy to be in the game.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's pretty impressive we should say that bigger SaaS companies tend to have a sale multiple based on revenue, but smaller SaaS companies, so like under $1 million, they're typically, the sale multiple is based on EBITDA. But bigger SaaS companies is like one of the only types of businesses that get a sale multiple based on revenue. And I think that's good to say that out loud, because a lot of people coming from other types of companies sometimes expect a sale multiple to be based on revenue. And if you're a smaller business, and especially a non-SaaS, that usually doesn't happen. It's usually based on profit. Okay. Can you talk, Ryan's asking, how do you anticipate AI impacting SaaS platforms?
Well, that's a very good question. I wish I knew entirely, because I am grappling with this now as I consider whether I should restart Boardroom Insiders. If you weren't at the top of the call, it's being shut down by a PE firm. I didn't sell to them, but they got a hold of it. They're shutting it down, and I'm considering restarting it. I think I'm very disappointed that they didn't retrofit Boardroom Insiders with AI. It's a no-brainer for that product. It's what I would have done, and it's what I will do if I rebuild it. and for the most part, I've talked to customers and they don't want it. And these are enterprise customers, big companies. They don't want it to change. They just want it to get faster and smarter, but they still like their dashboards. They still like, they don't want a blinking uh, cursor in a box to tell them, what should I do with my top 40 accounts and where should I focus? They want the dashboard. So I think that's going to be with us for a while, because at least for the enterprise marketing space, because all those people are like women in their 40s who run those things, 40s and 50s. They're not going to suddenly migrate to a little box where they just type questions. But the way I think about it is, at least for the short term, what I would do is just milk AI for all it can do on the tedious back-end operational tasks. And anything that involves your core differentiators or maintaining relationships with customers, prospects, human beings who are irrational and emotional, lead with humans there. It might be a too simplistic way of looking at it, but I'm not a fan of all the AI garbage that is coming into every space that I'm in right now. My inbox, my LinkedIn, I don't like it. I like it when it moves things faster and I don't have to see that it's AI. But when I recognize it as AI, it's because it sounds weird, or it doesn't sound human, or it's not getting me what I need right now when I'm engaging with it. And I'm saying, you're not helping me. I need this thing. And it just kind of goes off the rails. So I liken it to marketing automation. When marketing automation was taking over in the 2000s, everyone was all excited about it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know AI is way bigger game changer than marketing automation. I know that. But everyone just over-indexed on it. And so just because you can use it doesn't mean you should. And all of our inboxes have filled up with garbage, and it's never stopped since. And they thought that since they could say, hi, Sharon, or they knew what industry I was in, that, that was going to make me buy faster. And it didn't. And in fact, sales productivity did not increase that much with our marketing automation. So with AI, will it go the same way? I think AI is a bigger game changer, but use it strategically and create strategic no automation zones. And those are the zones where you're closest with your customers. It's just how I'm thinking about it now.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Question from Matt. Did you hire a wealth manager, and how did you pick one if you did?
I had a wealth manager before I sold, because I had some like 401ks and some investments from, when I actually was making a lot of money before I started the company. And he was very disappointed in me for a decade because nothing happened. The account didn't grow. But I hired, this is kind of funny. And then I fired him after I sold the company. He was really angry. But I fired him because I was asking him, I was desperate to have a tax strategy because I had just made all this money. And remember, I made it in January. So I had this full year. And then what happened that was even better, it wasn't better because there were floods in California, but California delayed the tax deadline for that year. So I had 18 months to figure it out. And every time I met with this guy, he wouldn't talk to me about taxes, which is the number one thing I told him I wanted to talk about. So I went with this other guy who really was on the ball with the tax planning. And that was the majority of what we talked about for the first, year, is how to minimize my taxes. And so one of the things we did, for example, is I was going to have this $2 million tax payment, but it wasn't due for like a year because of the extension of the deadline. And so we put it in a bond. I bought a bond. And I mean, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. And I was so stressed because I went online at treasury.gov and I bought this $2 million bond. And I was like, and then, what's going on with politics? I thought, well, what if it just goes poof? Like, I was so stressed about that bond because I needed that money back at the exact amount of time to pay the tax bill. But I made like 50 grand doing that in 6 months, right? So it wasn't like one big thing that he advised me to do. It was a bunch of little tiny things, but it added up to me only paying 30% overall tax on that 13 million, which I thought was really good. And I'm still with the wealth manager because once you invest the money, then it makes money. And then you still need tax strategy around that. I panicked when the market crashed in April and I bought a condo in San Francisco, which is always a good idea. And condos were the lowest prices they've been in like 8 years. So, they helped me get money out without tax implications because there was a category of investments that hadn't done that well. And so they just took it from there. So yes, hire a good wealth manager. I think they're worth what you pay them. I think I paid mine like a little over 50K last year, but he saved me well over that. There are all these people who think you can just do it yourself. I mean, even my partner was like, I'm just going to put everything in ETFs and set it and forget it, S&P 500. And then like 6 months later, he's like, I think I need a wealth manager.
Well, you've also talked about on this call about how you're glad that you used a banker, but Debbie's asking, do you think you need a banker or a broker for all sales sizes? And remember, we have a lot of people in our audience who are selling much smaller companies.
Right. No, I don't. And sometimes you end up selling to a friendly, like a partner or the former owner or one of your employees, or I don't think you need it in those cases. If it becomes like just an opportunity that emerges with someone that I don't think that you need it. Or but even if you're small, I would think you would want some kind of broker if you're just going to market without any potential buyers. Somebody needs to create that demand for you, and maybe you want to do it, but I don't want to do that. I don't know how to do that. So I would go to a broker, but I would find one that is reputable, that people recommend. I wouldn't just go to any broker. And I'm not really, I don't know what the difference between a broker and a banker is, honestly, but our banker earned his money. And I found out later that, a couple of deals were delayed in December. Remember, we were supposed to close before the end of the year. And like a Salesforce deal for like 350K and an IBM deal for like another 250K. Like these were big deals and they weren't closing. And I found out later from my banker that the buyer put the deal on hold for 2 weeks. And the banker didn't even tell me, because one of the things they do is they shield you from the drama and the stress. And he said, so he didn't tell me, but what he did do is every day he said, what's going on with those deals, Sharon? If you close one of those deals, I need you to text me. So he was badgering me about the deals, and now I know why, right? And if I were more experienced, I would have known why, but I was just like, oh, he's just really interested in our success.
Everybody has to go through it the first time and figure it out.
Yeah.
But you asked about the difference between a banker and a broker, or you mentioned that, and this is simplifying it, but basically the biggest difference is that bankers are doing bigger deals and brokers are doing smaller ones. So you are big enough that, you qualified for a banker. And this is one of the things that we do, by the way. They got acquired. Like if you don't have a network of people to ask for recommendations, you can ask us for a recommendation for a broker or an advisor or a banker, and we can help you figure out what you need. All right. Kate asked, when approached by PE prior to deciding to sell, did you have meetings with PE or ignore the outreach until you had your ducks in a row? This is a great question because so many people are now getting like spammed by, potential buyers. And what do you do when you get those inbounds?
It's such a great question. And, because when you've built something for 12 years and you start getting this outreach, you're like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And most of it's bullshit, honestly. I was, I had some meetings, like my partner knows this world better, so he helped me vet it, but he would just be like, don't get too excited because most of this is going to go nowhere. And my lead angel, who has done a gazillion deals, he told me the same thing. He actually said, Sharon, they're full of shit. Like they'll get you all excited and then it goes nowhere. They'll try to, chop down your valuation and chop it once you get in due diligence. And that's all true. But I had some meetings. I remember during the pandemic, I met with this guy in San Francisco because they were based in San Francisco. And that was the one I liked the most. They had a lot of, and what PEs will do is they'll usually buy 80% of your company. So you as a founder, you get all this cash and you get relief because you need it. And then they want you to keep running the company for usually about 3 years. They want to flip the company after about 3 years. And they'll give you part of the valuation that they'll give you is going to be targets. You have to hit these targets. And sometimes they're achievable and sometimes they're not, and there could be external forces that you have no control over that will cause you to miss your targets. And then you don't get the rest of that payout. And it can be very stressful from what I've heard. I did talk to some founders who sold to PE as part of that due diligence I did when I was interviewing bankers. And they, some of them were in the honeymoon period with their PE firm and things were going great. And others were like, I'm in hell. So what was attractive to me about this particular firm is it was small, local, and they will all say they're different. We are not assholes. We are good PE. And I believe them because I liked the guy. And this is the one that triggered the whole thing. I talked to them in 2020 and it was in April of 2021 because they had seen our financials. We were under NDA. And they just kept saying, we just want to see like another 6 months. And so every 6 months they'd reach out to us. And the third time they did that was in April of 2022. And by then we had a plan. We were really doing well and we weren't really in the mindset to sell. We had a plan for the rest of the year and we thought our pipeline was huge and we were going to do great. We wanted to get that extra ARR before we really looked at it. And so they called me and they said, what's going on? And I said, we're good. We've got our heads down. We're growing and we're not interested right now. And they said, well, that's too bad because we could give you a term sheet for 48 million right now. And no one had ever mentioned a term sheet. No one had ever mentioned evaluation. We were always wondering, what are we worth? We have no idea. And so that's when I called Michael, my angel. And that's when he said to me, they're full of shit. He said, Sharon, if you weren't thinking of selling yesterday, why would you think of selling just because you got this phone call? And I said, well, the tech market, blah, 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 blah. And he said, look, you're going to sell this company someday, but if you're exhausted, if you think the tech market's going to crash and you don't want to run it during a downturn, run a process and hire a banker. And so that's how that idea came to be. And then that's exactly what we did. And by the way, that PE firm was put on the list by me of people for our banker to contact. And they declined. They didn't even want to look at our deck, which is so weird.
That's crazy. I did not know that detail. That is crazy.
Yeah, we all thought that was pretty funny.
Debbie asked a question that's related to what you're talking about here. She said, if you're approached by a buyer, even one who you know well because you've worked with them before, would you take their offer and shop around, even if the offer is unexpected? Like, what should you do if an unexpected offer comes in? You've kind of talked about that a little bit here, but are there any other tips that you would? I mean, I like how you said you can use it as an impetus to potentially run a full process. And you mentioned this earlier, but often sometimes like you get a really, really great offer from a strategic buyer and it's just too good to pass up and you want to go with that one buyer. But usually the best way to increase your sale price is to have multiple buyers. So you want to have other buyers to leverage.
There's no one right answer here. It depends on so many factors that are personal to you. Are you exhausted? Do you just want to be done? Do you have something that going on in your life where you don't have the bandwidth for a 4-month process, at which due diligence takes 120% of your time for a few months. So, maybe you have a health crisis in your family, or you have kids you have to take care of. If you don't have that bandwidth, then I can see why someone would just take it, especially if it's a price that's acceptable to you. Or if you have all the bandwidth in the world and you want to experience what this process is like. I mean, for me, it was like I was going on a roller coaster ride. I want to do this once in my life. And I wanted to do it. I had the bandwidth to do it. I wanted to get the best possible price. And so that was my decision. Or, another thing that I thought about, which is unraveling at the moment, is my team. Like, I wanted my team to land someplace that was going to take care of them. And Euro Money had been in the data business since 1969. How was I to know that they were going to package it up and sell it to private equity in 9 months? So there are all these things to think about. Other people don't care about their team at all. So it just depends on what's important to you.
Cool. I'll take one more question and then we can wrap it up because we're coming at time here. But Clue asked, how have you filled your time post-exit? Does the entrepreneurial itch still persist?
Oh my God, yes. I didn't anticipate that, but I was very sad when they kicked me out of my own company. Knowing what I know now, of course they kicked me and Lee out because we were finally paying ourselves like $300,000 a year at that level. So they just took out $600K a year out of the budget just by getting rid of us. That's why they did it, I'm sure. And, but I wanted to stay, and I wanted to stay because I enjoy it. And I'm not done. I do TikTok videos. I'm basically a content creator, kind of entrepreneurial influencer at this point. It's just what's evolved, and I'm enjoying that. I promote my book. I go and speak everywhere around the country and even the world, and I love it. I'm not making any money or covering my expenses, but that's fine. I made my money. Now I'm a business person, so I would like to make money. So I am kind of, I vacillate between like, who cares? I'll just make my money off my money. And then I'm like, no, I want to figure out how to monetize what I'm doing, So I haven't figured it out 3.5 years in. And now there's this opportunity to restart the company. And someone I was talking to me the other night, and they're like, well, do you really want to do this? And I said, here's the thing. When I sold, I didn't want to leave. And now here's an opportunity for me to come back. But I am 60 years old now. So I'm grappling with all of that. It's, to be honest, like I have not been sleeping. It's not what you would think. I'm just kind of like all wound up about all this stuff. But sometimes that's just the kind of personality an entrepreneur has. It's hard to relax and not always be thinking about, what can I spin up next?
Where can people find you if they want more from you, which they probably will after this?
They can find me on Substack. The Substack newsletter that I write is called Scaling with Soul. It's the same title as the book. And I write a mixture of personal stories and also advice for entrepreneurs. My mission is to make entrepreneurship more accessible to all and to really just talk about it in plain language and not confuse people. TikTok is my main platform where I put pretty much everything. I'm much rantier and unfiltered there, kind of like how I was here. I probably swear more there than I did today. And the book, the book Scaling with Soul is on Amazon.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I know we all really appreciate it. And it's just great to learn from someone who's been there. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for setting this up and hosting. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you everyone for your questions.
Thanks for coming, everyone. We will see you soon. Bye.